Welcome to our panel AI and Humanity, some implications which I am happy to share. So my name is Alexander Kriebitz and I'm working at the Technical University of Munich. And I've also been doing research on the topic of artificial intelligence and human rights, although I have rather focused on traditional business ethics. But nevertheless, the topic of humanity and human values has become increasingly important against the backdrop of digitization on the one side, but also against the backdrop of globalization. And in general, the search for and of global values has become, I would say, a major endeavor for digitization, but especially for the rollout of artificial intelligence, which is used in a sizable number of different countries, of different cultures, which makes it very important to find a common ground on this very important topic. So to this end, we offer the panel Artificial Intelligence and Humanity, and we will study this topic from different perspectives. So we will begin today with the presentation of Mr. Vedang Ratanvatsa. He is IT and management consultant. He is a fellow of the Royal Society for the Encouragement of Arts, Manufactures and Commerce. And he has past work experience when it comes to consultancy. And his topic is a very interesting one, the topic of China and artificial intelligence. And this topic, of course, will gain importance given the rising role of China as a market, but also as a developer of artificial intelligence. So I leave the floor to Mr. Vedang Ratanvatsa, and I'm curious for your insight regarding China's AI strategy.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you for the brief introduction. And hello, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for attending this presentation, this session. Now I am going to quickly share my screen and start with the presentation. Here, Alexander, can you please tell me whether you can see my screen? Okay, great. Thank you. Just give me a minute. Here. So the topic of my presentation is China's approach to AI. When we talk about AI, things are, all the different countries of the world are working on different fronts in AI, and it is not just countries, governments, or businesses, but large private organizations like Baidu, Google, Microsoft are working on their own to develop things on the artificial intelligence front. Now, in this presentation, I am going to tell you what worked for China and how it makes sure that it crossed UI on the development of AI front, and what worked for China on the AI front. I think someone has left their mic on mute. Let me mute everyone's mic. Okay, done. So brief about me. I have a background in engineering and management, and have a good research background in this field, again in economics, management, and engineering, computer science. So to start the presentation, I would like to give a brief about this research that I did, in which I researched more than 350,000 publications globally from Scopus, which is a reputed database by elsewhere. So I sorted the publications on the basis of this keyword AI, artificial intelligence, and then did a quick analysis on the research documents, and I found that the number of research publications have been increasing rapidly, exponentially in these years since the last 5 to 6 years. And it is interesting to understand that in the year 2020, it was the first time when China defeated US in the number of AI research citations for AI publications. However, during the last decade, the US has significantly quoted more AI conference papers than China. So the thing that we can conclude here with this is that China is definitely giving a good, fight to the US for the top round, in at least in the research field of AI. And it is interesting to understand here that in case of US, private organizations, businesses accounted for the most number of publications, while in case of China, government accounts for second largest publication in China, which is very interesting because it gives us a brief understanding as to how important AI is for the government of China. So this is again an extension of the observation that that I had as per the analysis of that many number of 350,000 publications that I analyzed. Mostly it was from USA, then China. Again, top two positions are include China. Subject areas where these publications, which these publications included the obvious ones like computer science, engineering, mathematics. The interesting ones here are social science, medicine. So it is interesting to note here that medicine has a very good application of AI, and even in the research field, medical related applications are being focused on. Another interesting thing here is the aspect of social science, which means that people are focusing more on the ethical, societal, cultural aspects of AI. And it is interesting to note that, so it gives birth to the subject of computation social science, where we talk about algorithmic bias, data science, predictive policing, ethical concerns, and other such stuff. Even the subject of responsible AI is somehow related to computation social science. Moving ahead, National Natural Science Foundation of China funded the most number of research documents as per my research. And algorithm, machine learning, neural network were the most famous keywords. Chinese Academy of Sciences tops the list of applications. We are now talking about the global level, not Asia, not Europe, not Africa. Globally, Chinese academies affiliated to government organizations have done a good contribution, a very wide contribution, not just in China, but for the overall research field in the globally. China's government has done very good work, but China's private organization has done even a better work in utilizing the resources that they have in China. Now, China has a very large population, we all know that, but and AI requires a lot of data. So it makes sense for people, for companies, for governments, for startups to work on this large data set in China and utilize this. And we know this since recently that China has developed a comparative version of GPT-3, which is Pangu, Pangu. And it is interesting to know that such large developments are coming from China, and it is not just the government that is responsible for such large developments. Startups have a very big role to play. And for the fact, out of 45 global unicorns in AI, China has the biggest share of 19 unicorns within the country. Again, on another aspect, private organizations are working very well, and it is interesting to note that Alibaba and JD.com, which are one of the biggest private organizations, biggest tech companies in China, has contributed to 1/3 of digitization of Chinese retail stores. Now, the thing to note here is that Chinese private companies are supporting government in making sure that their policy, vision is implemented. It is important for us to understand that government has made a lot of policy-related developments. They have introduced AIDP, a 2030 plan. Xi Jinping has given a very good speech in the Congress in 2015. But it is important to understand that private organization, in collaboration with private organizations, government, the federal and the state-wise government of China has done a tremendous job, but the role of private organizations should not be, avoided or should not be ignored. Again, another good news about China. Let me ignore that. Now, so we know that China is notorious for its harsh stance on human related developments. Maybe it is on the ethical front or whatever front it is. But we all know that the great examples of social scoring or this great firewall that they have. They are notorious for such developments, but they have, in case of AI, they have done a very global an overall scope which include responsible part of AI and ethical norms. They have introduced a good set of ethical norms, fundamental ethical requirements that are required for any AI related program to run. So it is unjust, it is wrong to say that China has not covered every aspect of technology. They have covered even the cultural, capital related, policy related, every aspect of technology specifically for AI has been covered by the government very beautifully, and that is why we are seeing a tremendous growth coming out of China on that front. Again, they also released a set of responsible AI governance principles. Now, here comes the brief summary of what China has done in the AI front, and I will keep it short considering the time that we have. In 2016, Google London's office developed this program called DeepMind AI, and this program was able. This was basically an AI program that was good, that was very good in playing Go. Go is a game like chess. And Lee Sedol, a very famous South Korean player, so he was one of the best. He was the best in the overall world. And Google DeepMind AI program was able to win, was able to defeat him, defeat Lee Sedol. And it is very important to discuss here. It is very important for this presentation because in China, Go, the game of Go is deeply rooted into their cultural values. They train their children. They play this game in their villages. So it is deeply ingrained in their culture. It is a part of their culture. This game was part of their culture until it in 2016 they realized that something, a computer program has defeated their the best player of Go, the best player available in the world of Go, and that was a Sputnik moment, a moment, a dent in China's approach to AI. And after that, we saw a good set of announcements by the president, and a whole new program called AIDP, New Generation Artificial Intelligence Development Program, was introduced in the year 2017, just in the next year. So it is very important for us to understand this moment in the history of Chinese AI development. In this plan, in this instrumental plan by Chinese government, let me skip this slide and go to this one. In this plan by the Chinese government, they set out not just a set of years where they will achieve X set of targets. They even set out the numbers that so in 2013 they'll reach to 1 billion worth of market for AI, and in 2030 they'll reach to 1 trillion worth of market for AI. They even set out specific set of numbers, and it was a very descriptive plan, one of the most descriptive plans that I've ever read. So it is important to understand here how important this was for China, how the importance of this plan for China was. Another important thing in this plan was, which I briefly added in this presentation, in this slide, is they 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 introduced the concept of AI national champions, wherein businesses like large businesses like Tencent, JD, Baidu will be encouraged for specific set of government pushed implementations. So government is going to plan things and get it implemented via these large tech organizations who already have the required infrastructure, who already have the required technical knowledge. So government was the was the body that directed these organizations to work on things, and these organizations in return were given uh, uh, were given easy way to get things done from the government front, from the official front. So basically, that has been the instrumental thing, and I can go ahead and talk about criticality and small things that worked for the government, which include like unlike federal structure, China included a city-wide structure wherein different cities of China introduced their own set of AI-related, plans, AI-related 5-year plans, small plans like Beijing did, Shanghai did, Chongqing did, and so there were more than 20 cities that released their own set of AI policies, and so it was not just China as a whole that wanted to progress, but China as a union of different states wanted to progress, and that has been instrumental in making sure that AI developed at the core of China, and it is open now that China has in many ways surpassed the best countries of the world in at least in this field. And when we talk about the global strategies of other countries, so let us say Canada has worked on focusing on research via specific set of institutions. Most of the European countries are focused on ethical aspects of AI. India has worked on social related applications of AI. Countries like Australia have worked on talent development. UAE has worked on attracting talent from other countries. China, on the other hand, has facilitated their already built tech companies, facilitated them with all the infrastructure, government infrastructure, policy related norms, and made them grow from inside. They already had the required infrastructure, resources, talent. They only wanted a direction, which through the cooperation of private companies, they implemented very well. And with this, I would like to close this presentation. I'm not sure if the format allows us to have questions, but I'm happy to take any questions if there are.
So thank you, Bedan, very much for your introduction. So I have seen that also the other panelists are right now not here. So I think we have not just short time for discussion, but very a lot. And I personally have also done some research on the question of artificial intelligence and China, which makes your presentation very interesting to me. So I would perhaps start with the first question, which is more about the perception of China's AI strategy internationally. So how would you see the perception, how has it changed internationally when it comes to the role of China in artificial intelligence? Because we see, I would say, many different parts of the economy which are very strategically important. So we have traditional industry, we have also the made in China strategy, which is quite important. Also this Silk Road strategy, which is very essential. So how do you see this kind of strategy as perception of China, I would say, as a rising economy, as a rising, I would say, player in AI? So what is your point? Also when it comes perhaps to other countries which are observing this process.
A very interesting question, Alexander. And yes, I agree that China has a upper hand when it comes to supply chain, when it comes to hardware supply chain specifically. In case of software, which will extend to AI, a highly neat and developed software will extend to the form where we can call it AI, a good program. China has a major problem here. China's people do not speak English. China's people do not speak English. They speak Chinese, or they speak other languages that are not understood by other countries, and that has been a turning point in China's software related developments, because China has not been able to export its software products, while its neighboring country, India, due to its English speaking ability, has been a global hub of IT related talent, IT talent, and most of the companies are outsourcing their IT work to India, which could have been to China. So to answer your question, I don't think China's approach is going to dominate the world, because their programs are different. Their most efficient machine learning program is not in English. They're not going to go to English, and we are not susceptible to Chinese. So there's a lot of gap there, and I don't see this gap getting closer anytime soon.
Okay, I think that's an interesting question, especially right now. I think there are also many news, I would say even culminating in the fact that even English language education is being reduced in China. So I think in the case of Shanghai, they have even downscaled English speaking education. So I think also, like, right now there is even a strong political drive within China to change its preferences when it comes also to English speaking, to global integration, etc. So I think this tendency you have referred to is even aggravating to some extent. I think there is also perhaps another important point which is often discussed, namely the integration of, I would say, military technologies when it comes to artificial intelligence. I think this is the typical question we have in the West about that. So what is your perspective? Do you think that the military part, but also the dual use part, are very closely interrelated when it comes to AI development in China?
Yes, a very good point, Alexander, again. And this point makes more sense after this document that has been released by USA, wherein they explicitly explained their defense approach towards AI, and why and how they are going to make use of AI in defense. It was very, a unique thing from any country in the world, because countries were not explicitly saying it out loud that they will make use of AI in defense, but US did. And China, by the way, has a very good set of software related budget specifically for defense. But again, their structures, their softwares, their developments are not of very big use to other countries because of the language and technology, because of the language gap. So again, I would say that their development in this front, on the defense AI front, is their personal kind of development, and will not be very easily utilized by any other country. So on the social front, no, China is not helping us, helping your country or my country or any other country on that front, but it is definitely building a very, very strong personal, army of technology related gun, maybe say technology gun.
Okay, but do you see at least some companies that might be able to do so? For example, if you take Huawei, which is an international company. So do you think that they are able to overcome this issue of, let's say, being stuck in the Chinese market when it comes to AI solution? Or would you say that this kind of general rule of thumb is applicable to all major Chinese companies?
On that front, I think there have been many developments by different countries. It started from USA, then even India blocked a lot of Chinese related applications. Then UK also did block the entry of Huawei. Then many European countries also did, took this step. But it eventually comes down to the importance of data. And whenever a country will understand the importance of the financial value of data, I think this aspect will be better understood by the people of that country. I'm not sure whether this is going to come in the upcoming years, but it is going to take a lot of time till we understand what is the real value of data, and the concepts like metaverse, will make us understand this better, because we have now concepts of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, wherein we value data, we value something. So in the upcoming years, I am positive, I'm confident that when we'll understand the value of data, we'll understand the value of transfer of data, and we'll focus more on data privacy, data protection related aspects, and that will help us, create that friction that we require on the AI front, wherein AI can be utilized for bad things, let us say.
Okay, so thank you very much for sharing your insight with us. So from the audience, are there further questions to Mr. Watzer? Okay, I see. So if there might be some questions later, you are also free to ask. So I see that Ms. Okengwu again has joined our ranks. So I'm happy also to introduce her. She is senior lecturer at the University of Port Harcourt in Nigeria. She is also experienced in the levels of higher education industry. She has been working in completely different fields related to research design, lecturing, academic research, and also statistics and data analysis. So her presentation will also be very interesting. So her main focus lies in the presentation on the ethical and environmental impact of artificial intelligence in Africa, with a specific focus on agriculture. So we are very interested in your presentation, Ms. Okengwu, and let's try to start it. So do you have any technical issues? Ms. Okengwu, can you hear me? Okay, I think there must still be some technical issue. So are you able to share your presentation, perhaps? So that we can try out what might be the problem in the connection. Okay, it seems to work. So the problem is that we are still not able to hear you, unfortunately. Perhaps as an alternative, you can try to connect also with your smartphone to the conference. So this could also be a solution, that you have your sound via your smartphone and the presentation via your computer. But you are able to hear us. Okay, that's good to know. Perfect. Then we will have a short break and wait for some minutes. Okay, so I think we will have to wait another couple of minutes. So are there, from your side, from the audience, any questions in regards to the topic of humanity and artificial intelligence you would like to discuss, perhaps?
Meanwhile, Alexander, why don't you tell us about what is the research work that you're working on? We're happy to understand.
Yes, so thank you for the question. So my personal research is related to the question of artificial intelligence and human rights. So I'm also studying the Chinese artificial intelligence strategy, however, from a different angle. And my research is particularly involved when it comes to the question of the Uyghurs and also the use of AI in situations where we do not have human rights. So this is, I would say, a major factor here. And from my personal perspective, it's quite interesting then to compare or to analyze where human rights violations basically exist when it comes to artificial intelligence. And here we can basically distinguish between different factors we might analyze. So on the one hand, we have, of course, the specific issue of data protection, which is right now fiercely debated within international affairs. And here, of course, we have, I would say, when it comes to the United Nations, when it comes to the United Nations, when it comes to the European Union, when it comes also to developing countries, very different perspectives, which are interesting to analyze. And I think this is also, I think, one of the major debates which need to be sorted out internationally. So I think this is one major aspect of the international AI ethics discourse. And another aspect is obviously the question of bias, which is increasingly important. So when we look right now at the question of biases in artificial intelligence, we still have a traditional idea in mind that we have, for example, biases against specific parts of the population. But with the rising debate on intersectional bias, we have a much more complicated aspect to it, so that people are not just discriminated against because of one specific factor, but because of multiple factors. So you have, for example, specific types of bias prevailing in the United States, which are not directed against Black people, but specifically directed against Black males, for example, or against people with disabilities. So this appears to be, I think, one driving factor right now in the international debate. And I think this is very interesting to discuss then from an international point of view when it comes to universal values, because I think when we look at international societies, we'll find that biases might be completely different. So we recently conducted at a technical university a study which is related to biases in the financial market against persons with Jewish names. So there has been a survey basically which has been conducted online, and people were asked about their assessment of a financial transaction. So it was basically an example. We have one person which is investing money for his or her child. And people were evaluating the action ethically. So people can, of course, invest the money in the stock market. It can be more or less speculative. So there might be different forms. And what we had is basically the same basis scenario. So we had people with German names and we had people with Jewish names. And people were not aware of the fact which group they were in. So they were just evaluating one specific vignette and they were evaluating it from an ethical point of view. And what we basically could identify is that in the case of Jewish names, people had a more negative perspective of the ethicality of the investment decision. So we have the very same investment decision, but we have a completely different moral judgment on it. And I think this was quite striking when we analyze it, because it tells us that we also have non-traditional, or perhaps non-traditional is not the right word, but we have very old biases in our society when it even comes to the classification of certain actions. And I think here we have far-reaching implications when it comes, for example, to the dividing line when it comes to murder, for example. So we evaluate a murder and we might then choose a penalty for it. And we have our stereotypes in mind, and we are applying those when judging human behavior. So this is, I think, a very important point. And I think this connects to biases, because we have right now a certain discourse which is focusing on specific properties. We have a discourse on gender and bias. We have a discourse on race and bias and those kind of things. But I think when we look at specific application cases, it might be that, for example, Russian names might be identified as problematic when it comes to money laundering, for example, or when it comes to email accounts and those kind of things. So when categorizing an email as spam or not. So I've personally witnessed, for example, working together with Russian colleagues for a very long time, that their emails are more likely to end up in the spam filter than other names. So this is for me also an indicator, perhaps for a bias in the system, which is then having certain assumptions that certain people from certain countries are more likely to send spam emails, but they can also disrupt your personal communication. So I think these kind of aspects in AI ethics, especially when it comes to human rights, are quite quintessential. So I think those cases are quite relevant. I think another point from my own research, I can share here. I will also share it in tomorrow's panel, where I'm also speaking about human rights. But anyway, of course, the question of explainability and trust. Because what we right now see in the pandemic is that people are in many regards not trusting a specific technology for whatever reason. So we have a certain level of distrust in our society. We see that internationally, it is not the same level. We have countries with very high vaccination rates. We have countries with lower vaccination rates. There is some kind of, I would say, correlation perhaps with political, I would say, affiliation to some extent. There might also be a correlation with the way people feel represented in their country. But apart from that, what we can observe is really that there is a major debate to tackle. And vaccination is a topic we have for 200 years. So we have the first compulsory vaccination in the early 19th century. But when we right now look at AI, which is perhaps a much more complex technology, we also have to find a way to establish trust. And establishing trust, I think, in this sector will be really difficult to achieve. So I'm also perhaps wondering on your ideas about that. There are some approaches in explainability, in making AI explainable for when it comes also to the question of basically applying the same standards like in the pharma industry for artificial intelligence, so that you have some kind of basically depiction of negative side effects which come around when artificial intelligence is used, when you might have certain patterns of biases, when you might have some kind of information which is necessary for the people to understand before they take the AI instead of a drug. So I think these kind of application cases are quite important then to discuss, because they have some relation to human rights, obviously. So this is basically my field of research, where also AI and humanity is linking up too. So I'm not sure, perhaps Vedang, you also have some insights on that. So how do you regard perhaps the debate of I would say trust in technologies when you look also at the AI strategy of China? Because what we see is that the Chinese population seems to have a strong trust in artificial intelligence, perhaps more than in the West. But do you have perhaps some more information on that based on your own experience?
No, very interesting thing, Alexander. Very interesting topic that you have chosen for your research. I'm glad that I got the chance to hear whatever you just said. On that front, I think there is also a very primitive, very important aspect of location here. So whatever you said may be true in Europe, but if you go to America, Jews are one of the richest communities. So we may not have someone from a Jewish descent have their names in the spam, list when we talk about any finance-related data or fintech-related data. But on the other hand, maybe it is the case in Europe. So it also depends a lot on where exactly we are. So in case of India, government is very focused on social aspects of AI instead of capitalist aspects of AI. So they don't want technology companies to work on AI, but instead want companies to work on the social aspects of AI which they have defined. So again, it is a country-based approach. I think, Miss,
yes.
when you,
I've also seen that Ms. Okengwu joined us again, so I will give her the right to present. Ms. Okengwu, can you hear us? Okay, I think they're okay. Now it is better. Mr. Batza, are you able to hear her? Because it might also be a problem from my side.
Doctor, we can see you, but we cannot hear you.
Okay, but let's just wait. Perhaps the problem solves itself within the next minutes. Yes, we can give you some time. So. So the screen sharing is working perfectly. So perhaps it might also be a software problem. So this could also be perhaps a solution for that it doesn't connect really.
Alexander, do we have numbers that Dr. Kangu can dial from her phone and connect via call? We don't have this functionality.
Yes, so I will try to look it up, but I think we don't have it for this panels, unfortunately. But I will also try to find a long invitation. So Ms. Okengwu, could you please share your email address with me so then I could send you perhaps some more information? But the problem is I think it will only be possible to dial in from Germany, but we can at least give it a try. Okay, so the email is on the way to you. So let's try our best. Yes, I think WhatsApp is also a good idea. So send you my phone number, and perhaps you could call me, and then we connect to the call. So did you receive my emails? So I fear that we are slowly running out of time, but let's try to get it within the next minute.
I can hear you.
You hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, you can hear me, but not from the WhatsApp.
Yes. Can you also hear yourself from the screen?
Okay, let me off this. Let me off this. Okay, you can hear me now from the mic? Okay, from the PC, okay. The wrong mic was selected. Okay, so please help me. So can I go ahead? Okay.
Okay, perfect. It's working right now.
You can hear me, Alexander?
Perfect. So now you can go ahead. The problem is finally solved.
So, yes, thank you. You know, my name is Uchi Okengu, and the title of the paper to present is Ethical and Environmental Impact of AI Implementation in Agriculture. And we all know that agriculture play a major role in improving economy, but it sustains food security also across the continent and especially in Africa. So introduction of AI has improved outcome from agriculture in Africa, which has advantages and disadvantages, as well as bordering around ethics and environment. Motivation for this research is to create awareness for both the positive and negative impacts of AI in agriculture around Africa. And we have advantages of AI in agriculture, which are things like the use of smart devices that complete tasks faster. Most of our agricultural activities are being completed faster with smart devices. Use of drones, sensors for monitoring farm activities or agricultural activities, which eventually improves crop yield in Africa and around the world. Then we're looking at the ethical concerns and the environmental concerns. So for ethical concerns of AI in agriculture, we have use of data and insights, which has to do with data ownership and intellectual property. So the use of data, there are concerns about distribution of agricultural data to third parties because farmers fear that their data may end up in wrong hands and subsequently be used against them. And we also have privacy and security. And we know the trend of cybersecurity these days can lead to vulnerability of agricultural data. There's also a concern that the drones and other data retrieving technologies monitor farmers, thereby infringing upon their personal data. Then we also have the bias, accuracy of data and recommendations. When we talk about the bias, we can see that providing inaccurate data to farmers or giving inaccurate recommendations may lead to loss in harvest. Inaccurate recommendation may lead to loss in harvest, ill livestock, and loss of earnings. So training algorithms with biased or bad data to develop AI systems that are used for decision making in our agricultural sector is a big problem. Lastly, we'll look at the digital divide. Digital division among most rural farmers in Africa find the IoT and AI systems very complicated to understand, use, or deploy. So there's really need to be able to train these rural farmers before you can think of using or deploying AI in agriculture. So the next one is the environment concerns. And we looked at three issues there. Carbon emission, we know about the climate change, the greenhouse gas emission,